Home of the prodigal son, young Chad Townsend. And Chad Townsend plays on, plays to the whistle, kicks away for Valentine home. Townsend, brilliant.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Chad Townsend Show. If you're new here, please make sure you do subscribe. It is greatly appreciated. Drop us a comment, ask us a question here on YouTube. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure you rate and review the podcast. It does help us out a lot here on the Chad Townsend Show. And we really do appreciate it. So let's bring him in. Victor, the producer. Mate, how are you?
I'm great, mate.
How was your weekend? Sorry?
Weekend was great.
Long
How
weekend?
Good is a long weekend?
Long weekend. I feel like this is probably one of our favourite weekends of the year as Aussies.
Going Easter, back-to-back into Anzac Day.
Doesn't get much better. Back-to-back weekends. Long weekend.
For both leisure and footy. It's just
into Anzac Day. Plenty happening as always. Your Sharkies got a win as well. So
got a win.
Any soccer on the weekend?
No soccer on the weekend. We have a pause for the Easter break.
Yeah,
We're back next week.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
this week. So
yeah, beautiful.
It's good.
All right, on today's show, guys, we have what's trending in the NRL. Plenty happened in the last week in the National Rugby League. As always, it's the game that just keeps on giving, and we're going to go over some of the biggest things that happened, the most trending topics in the NRL. We look at the biggest moments from this past weekend, round 7 reaction, our nominees for Big Footy Guy of the Week, Halfback House, you know what it is, fan questions as well. We really appreciate you guys sending your fan questions in. So that's on today's show, but let's just get stuck straight into it. Obviously, last week, we record our show on Mondays, but this week we pushed it back one day because of the public holiday and obviously the long weekend, which we just spoke about. But last weekend after we recorded, obviously the Lachlan Galvin drama basically took over the whole of the NRL, and there's a lot to unpack about the situation, and I feel like having the last week to sort of read up on it and watch and hear what certain people have said about it, and gather all the information, gather the facts. Obviously the Tigers made a really big decision to leave him out of the NRL team last weekend, which was a massive call. And obviously, we've got some fans sitting on the Tigers side of the whole situation, some sitting on Lachlan Galvin's side of the whole situation. So, plenty to unpack at this stage of the year for the Tigers, who are actually going, really well so far. Obviously, it's been a pretty big distraction for them in the last week, and obviously they didn't get a win on the weekend without him in their team. I guess I can understand why Tigers fans are siding with the club, after what's happened in the past with Teddy and Mitch Moses and Aaron Woods, obviously, losing some of their most promising youngsters. But I guess, in my opinion, I think his camp have mismanaged the situation. And, some things that have been said and the reasons why he's been sort of dropped from the Tigers team, around what his camp think that he can achieve elsewhere. And for them to kind of say that publicly and to the club, I thought was just the wrong thing to do, wrong thing to say. Like, you kind of want to keep that stuff in-house. You don't really want to say too much. Like, you might think a certain way, but like if you go and express certain things, like you're going to offend certain people. So I think, there's certain ways to go about it. If it was me, look, I would have gone about it a different way, and I'd like to, hope that's probably the right way to go about it, because, I think what's been said is, it's caused such a stir in the whole NRL, and obviously, there's been so many opinions on what he could have done, what he should have done, and obviously his management. And, I guess regardless of this whole thing, the thing with Lachlan Galvin is he's an absolute superstar. Like, he's going to get paid. He's going to get a massive deal, and he's probably going to go on to, have an incredible career. But, this has probably put a little bit of a stain on, thing. And it's probably like, it's not him. Like, this kid's 19 years old. Like, he's so young, and he's put a lot of trust into people that have been managing his situation. And yeah, like for me, I just think they've sort of dropped the ball a little bit. I think they could have done the whole thing a little bit better. At the end of the day, you've got to, have a lot of respect for your club and who you represent, your fans as well. And yeah, anything for you there, Victor, and you want to jump in from a fan's point of view?
I mean, for the fans, they're the biggest losers in this situation, right? Like, they've had they had a rough start to the season, but the last 3 weeks, they've found some amazing form, and they're looking like a proper footy side. And then for this to drop just out of nowhere Like there were always talks about him leaving, but like for this to drop in the way it did, it's just so unfortunate for the fans. I really don't see why this couldn't happen in the off season.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the thought behind that was, but
well, I think the Tigers initially went to Lachlan Galvin and wanted to, extend him even now. Like he's on contract next season, which happens. It's normal to happen, and I think where it's gone probably downhill was Galvin's camp have said, no, we're not going to re-sign, don't bother, because we don't think that Benji Marshall or the Tigers can develop him and his game to where it needs to be. When you've got 18 months left on your deal. So if you say something like that, like it's just not going to go down well for the next 18 months. Like, do you think that now you can just play for the next 18 months and it'd be okay? That's what I'm saying before. Like you might think that, but like you don't say that. Yeah. So if you think that, in my opinion, you can just say, look, I don't want to re-sign at the moment. I want to take a step back. I just want to focus on the football, and we can sort that stuff down the track. That's it. Then those discussions get put away. Nothing comes out. This all then probably equates to nothing. And then the story is that he wants to go to the open market, which is completely normal. Happens all the time. Players go to the open market all the time. And him being 19-year-old and young, it's a normal thing for him to do, to go and see what's out there and what he wants to do. And then you kind of can keep a tight lip on, your thoughts and feelings around who you think can develop you as a coach or a player. And ultimately, it outlays respect for your current club. Yeah. In my opinion, that's the way that you handle things in that situation. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or feelings or questions. I'd love to hear in the comments below. Like, did you guys think it was the right thing for the Tigers to do to get him out of the team? Do you think he handled the situation the right way? Could he have handled it better? And then obviously, the players in his team as well obviously had their say, with the posting on social media and
going back to like the reports of obviously the money or the development of the player, right? Like he got offered $5 to $6 million over 5 years.
Yeah.
At 19.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Now, for that to be turned down, would that mean that it's not about the money, it's about the development, right?
Yeah, I mean, I said this before. Like I said it before, Lachlan Galvin is a superstar player. Like he's going to get paid a lot of money over his career as the salary cap keeps going up, and he's one of the brightest young half 5'8" in the game. The spine players get paid the most money, and it just goes to show that it's not about the money, but like again, you just have to be careful about how you go about it. You know what I mean? You have to have some respect. Like at the end of the day, respect of who your employer is. The fans that turn up. Like, so I just, like I said, I've said it a couple of times. I just think there's been a little bit of a lack of respect with that situation. But an interesting one about Jerome Luai and I think it was Taruva as well,
yeah,
who posted on their story, Instagram stories. And I guess, as many of you guys know, like I'm a fan of social media. I use social media. I've always tried to use it in a positive way to promote the game, having fun, what I like to do away from footy, my family, this podcast, the YouTube, the vlog, everything. I've always tried to use it in a positive way, but I don't know. I just thought this was it wasn't the right thing to do, and I saw a lot of people saying like this is great leadership, and I understand Luai in the fact that his reaction was to stand up for Benji and the club by posting that, and look, I get that. Like I like that his reaction is to back the club, and at the end of the day, like he's signed there for long term. I know he's got some clauses in the contract. But he wants the club to, succeed. So, his reaction was to post it on social media. But I just thought this needed to be handled. And I've heard some podcasts and shows over the past week, and I tend to agree with this situation. I thought it might have been Gordon Tallis, I think he said it, was that, you get these guys in the play, you get them in a room. You get these guys in a room and you let them have it out and talk about it. And, I've actually seen this in my day. I've seen I'm not going to say who the players were or what club I was at, but I've seen 2 players have a big disagreement, and then we're at training, and punches were nearly thrown, and another senior player got these 2 players and pushed them into a room and closed the door, and they just had a conversation, had it out. Then he went in there and just sort of, helped out the situation, managed it. They spoke it out, and everyone was like, "Oh man, what's going on? Like, what's going on?" But then spoke it out, had it out, said it how it was, whatever happened, and it stayed in house, and that was it. It wasn't posted on social media for everyone to see and be a part of. And that's the thing. I think the Tigers have probably lacked over the past couple of years is there seems to be a lot of information, like a lot of leaks.
A lot of leaks, eh?
A lot of leaks.
Someone around this club.
A lot. And I feel like Benji Marshall is really trying his hardest to change that about the Tigers. And that's what I feel sorry for. I feel sorry for Benji because he's in the middle of all of this, and I think he's doing a great job at the moment. I think he's getting his team like last year. When he took over from Sheens, and now he's been able to recruit Jerome Luai and all these players for this year, and they're improving. They're making steady steps up the ladder, and he's kind of stuck in the middle of it.
Yeah, it seems like you see somewhat of a culture forming at the Tigers.
Yeah,
which they were very cultureless before.
Even like the way they celebrate with like the claw and that, like that's culture. That is culture. That is like getting around it, having fun, celebrating. Like then like we spoke about last week with Tui Pelotu when he's doing the money. Like that's culture. It takes over. The fans get involved. They're having fun, enjoying themselves, enjoying their footy. And like I said, I think Benji's really, truly, trying his hardest to change that, trying to reduce the leaks in the club. Because you hear other clubs, like the top clubs in the competition, you don't hear anything. There's no like leaks whatsoever from inside their 4 walls. And then the clubs who don't seem to have the success on the field, they're the ones that you kind of, usually hear things and stuff, that rumors and whatever and stuff that comes out and a few leaks and whatnot. So, obviously been massive news for Lachlan Galvin and the Tigers over the past week. It will be interesting to see whether he comes back this week. Obviously, they played Easter Monday yesterday, the Tigers versus Parramatta Eels, and we'll touch on that game a little bit later on in the show. But, obviously they took an L.
Yeah.
So,
just quickly before we move on, where do you think it went?
Where do I think Galvin ends up? Well, I mean, it has to be Parramatta, doesn't it? I've seen Jason Riles talking into a microphone on the weekend with a big smile on his face when he's been asked about Lachlan Galvin. I'm pretty sure you may have to look this up, Victor. I'm pretty sure he may have played juniors at Parramatta. I might have to just quickly check that. But, yeah, I think he ends up at Parramatta. I think, obviously they've lost Dylan Brown. Dylan Brown has left to go to Newcastle for 10 years. So they'll have a fair bit of cash in the bank account to spend, have a spot there for their 5'8", and I think Galvin ends up at Parramatta.
Yeah, he played
Harold Matthews. So he's a Parramatta junior, played Harold Matthews at Parramatta. I think he goes back to Parramatta, but the interesting thing is like how the next couple of weeks play out with regards to, does he leave this year? Does he leave at the end of the year? Do the Tigers say to him, like, you're free to negotiate? Because he's not able to negotiate right now until like November 1. That's the actual laws of free agency right now in the NRL.
Yeah. Well, you saw on Sunday, there was reports that Galvin's management lodged a little legal over the social media.
Yeah. And that's like, how does that play? Does he just rock up to training today or tomorrow and is everything sweet? Are they like, him and Luai and Taruva, like, are they talking? Like, can they play this weekend together or like, hey, what happens there? So, like I said, I'm interested to see how this whole thing plays out. But obviously the legal letter is pretty serious stuff. I mean, you don't just send a legal letter to, for the sake of it, do you?
To me, it seems like a bit of a push for
Yeah, I mean, I think all roads are leading to an immediate release. I think it's probably best for him to move on and for the Tigers to not really have someone who doesn't want to be there right now. But, the thing that sucks for the Tigers is he's obviously a really great player with a load of potential. And I think the Tigers will want something in return. If they're going to give him up now, before the end of the season, they'll probably want something in return, either cash or another player. And then otherwise, if they don't get that, I think they'll just play him in New South Wales Cup for the rest of the year. That's rugby league, ladies and gentlemen. That's the circus of rugby league, and we love it, don't we? We love the circus. We do love the circus. What do we got next? There, Victor? Yeah. Look, I think it's great. $10 tickets on Good Friday. We get 65,000 fans to an NRL game. The NRL has always kind of been in the AFL's shadow with regards to crowd attendance. I guess the Broncos, I think the Warriors, maybe Melbourne, all the teams in the big capital cities, even the Roosters as well. Obviously, I think, are at the top of the crowd, but 65,000 is insane. I love the cheap ticket options for families. We saw people sitting up in the top, in the nosebleeds, so I loved it. I thought it was great. I think it's probably not feasible for teams to do it every single week, but on special occasions on Good Friday and whatever it is, let's do that. Let's get as many families as we can on a family-friendly time, I might add as well. 4:00 on a Friday afternoon. Everyone's got the day off. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
I can't see why people would be against that.
Yeah. We do. We want to see the growth of the game, more fans at the games, more people on seats celebrating, more crowds. And obviously you hear all the Bulldogs players in their post-game interviews talking about the crowd and how amazing it was. And obviously, the Bulldogs are playing really well at the moment. And obviously that's probably why a lot of people, turned up as well. Yeah.
After the game, Jairo went up to the stands, was pretty upset at the Bulldogs fan. Hasn't been confirmed what was said to him.
Yep.
If anything was thrown at him. But it brings up the question, what's the line in this situation between clubs, fans and players?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Obviously, I saw what happened on the weekend. I did a little bit of research on the altercation after the game. I was obviously watching it live, and I thought to myself, what's okay for fans to say? And obviously, depending on what type of abuse, obviously, if it's personal, obviously racial abuse is just not acceptable in any matter at all. But then, what is okay for a fan to say to a player, on the bench? And, I know players cop a lot from fans at games. I've heard it all. I haven't spent too much time sitting on the bench, but I've heard it from the fans. But fans are allowed to say what they like, and players are not allowed to say anything.
Yep. Really.
So there's rules for some and rules for others.
Do you think that's the game? That's the game's game?
That is the game.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to cop it. But sometimes it's and in this case, Jai Arrow, he's obviously just had enough of what was said and what happened. I don't blame Jai Arrow for his reaction. You're getting pumped on the field, you're losing, you're frustrated as hell. And then a fan, someone who he doesn't even know you, is just getting into you verbally. The frustration levels are obviously going, through the roof. And, Jai Arrow said that it got the better of him, the situation, and he should have handled it differently. But look, I don't blame Jai Arrow for his reaction. He's a passionate guy, and I would probably potentially do the same thing if I was in his situation. I saw an instance the other week with in the AFL, Patrick Dangerfield was walking off the field into the tunnel, and Bailey Smith was right behind it. They play for Geelong, and someone had verbally said something really, really bad to Patrick Dangerfield, who's one of the greatest players in AFL, I'm pretty sure. And Bailey Smith had heard it. And he just turned to the fan and gave him the double bird to the fan's face. And the whole thing was caught on camera, obviously, because everything is on phones these days. And then, that clip ended up going a little bit viral, and he got fined $1,000. From your point of view, Victor, I need your answer. Is that fair?
That's play on.
But should he have been fined $1,000?
No, I don't think so. I think bird's sweet.
Yeah, and
I'm fine with throwing the bird out.
the double bird.
It's a bit of character, right?
Yeah, and then I saw Bailey Smith did an interview with the News the next day, and they were like, do you think that's the right look for kids and what? Obviously, they go straight to the kids' look and things like that.
That's true.
Bailey Smith answered the question perfectly. He said, look, if I had my time again, I probably would have done something differently. But, when is enough enough? Like, these fans just think they can say whatever they like. And they said something which I cannot repeat here on camera right now because it's absolutely disgusting. And I needed to stand up for my captain and wanted to just do something, and he did it. So, again, I don't blame him, but, players have got to understand that their reaction... a lot of times we're getting baited for a reaction that people want to film and use as clout and, show their friends or say, hey, I said this to such and such, or I filmed this and whatever, you know what I mean? So It's a dangerous world we live in, man. It's a sad world sometimes.
You got to tread lightly sometimes.
You got to tread lightly. And sometimes, it's best to just ignore. Best just to ignore it. As hard as it is sometimes, it's best just to ignore it.
Yep.
What's next, Victor?
Moving on.
Yeah.
Origin halves. What a game by Mitch Moses.
Yeah.
On the weekend.
Huge game from Mitch Moses in his return. Parramatta look completely different team. I know we'll touch on this again a little bit later on, but yeah, obviously it sort of Origin's just around the corner, and obviously with Moses playing really well on the weekend, it's going to bring up the questions around the Origin halves, and obviously, Mitch done an exceptional job last year, and obviously Cleary's back now. Penrith just got their first win on the weekend for a couple of weeks, and obviously he's the best halfback in the competition. So, do we, I'm talking about we, New South Wales.
You roped him to me for that. I was shocked the other way.
Well, I bleed blue, so you know what I mean? I bleed blue. Do we go for a Cleary-Moses combination, or does Luai go in there? The thing about Cleary and Moses is they're both right foot kickers they play predominantly on the right side of the field. Luai is a left foot kicker, and he predominantly plays on the left side of the field, a lot of the time. So, Cleary and Luai have obviously played a lot of footy together. But can Mitch Moses defend on the left side of the field and kick on the left side of the field? That's the questions I guess the selectors are going to have to ask themselves. Do I think it can work? Of course I think it can work. I think that they're going to be I think they will be the halves. I think they'll go with that combination, but it would just obviously come in with a little bit of, a bit of, I guess, organisation around who's going to do what and what side of the field. So that's one to keep an eye on.
Yeah. I mean, looking at Reynolds and Hunt, who are both sevens.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to work. But
yeah, I think
then
because
again, there have been questions.
Ben Hunt has taken like a step back in his play this year.
Yeah.
Reynolds does a lot of the kicking, a lot more of the organising. Ben Hunt obviously did that for a long time at the Dragons. But with Ben Hunt playing 5'8", he kind of just sits on the left and just sort of looks eyes up and then just calls the ball when he wants it. And then will kick when he wants it. Like, he might only have literally 3 kicks a game, where at the Dragons, he would have had 20. You know what I mean? So you kind of take a little bit of a lesser role just to kind of work in with the team and your position on the field. So that's probably something Moses might have to do at Origin level, take a little bit of a lesser role, lesser kicks, a little bit lesser touches, and just sort of play that sort of running role on the short sides and things like that. So that's what I mean by that situation.
Yep. Next up.
Yeah.
Cam Murray. Pulled out for the rest of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just seen that this afternoon, actually. Just came out live. So Cam Murray ruled out for the remainder of the season with a complication in his Achilles injury. So a huge loss for South Sydney. Obviously, Achilles, I'm pretty sure Achilles is a 6-month return. I'm not 100% sure. But 5 months, there you go. So he's supposed to be out for 5 months, but has had a complication, and now will sit out for the rest of the year. So a huge loss for South Sydney. That just sucks, to be honest. He would have played, Origin this year if he was healthy and fit. He's one of the best players in the competition, one of the best ball-playing locks in the competition. South have really missed him in the middle, although Hubner, the young fellow, I think is doing a tremendous job in his replacement. Obviously Cam Murray is Cam Murray, so... it sucks for him. Best wishes to him for a speedy recovery. And let's move on to some of the takeaways from round 7 in the NRL. The first game last week, and the Dragons 20, Manly 18. Really surprising game, this one. Brookvale Oval, Four Pines Park, kept relatively quiet this game. I thought Manly, they were just a little bit off in this game. A lot of balls, over, a lot of mistakes. Cherry Evans, not finding the right person for passes. Balls going over the sideline. I thought they were just a little bit off. Disappointing loss for Manly. Dragons make a couple wins on the trot now. And look, I don't think the Dragons have been playing their best either. I think they've been in pretty much a tight game every single week. They've won a couple of tight games and they've lost a couple of tight games as well. So look, I think the Dragons, still have a fair bit of improvement in them. But obviously, there were some standout performances for them. Gutherson has been solid so far this season, has really shown why they sort of targeted him as a recruitment player this year, with his leadership, and also his stat lines have been really impressive. Young Couchman has been really, really impressive. 56 tackles, 156 metres. I've really enjoyed watching him and his development. Obviously, he's been wearing the 8. I've really, really enjoyed, watching him. Lehigh Hopewadi, when you can take out Turbo and you've got a backup fullback in Lehigh Hopewadi who can come in and run 278 metres, a try assist, line break assist, the kid's an absolute superstar. I think, I'm not sure where Turbo sort of fits in their equation in their side next year if he moves to 5'8", which has been a little bit of talk around. I don't know if that's going to work, but Lehigh Hopewadi, he's going to be a gun fullback for a long, long time. Even though obviously Turbo is Turbo, he's a gun as well. So better to have 2 guns than no guns. Yeah, so awesome game. Did you have anything you want to add there, Victor?
Yeah, Cookie was playing a little lock forward role when Little was on. What do you think Flano's doing this?
Yeah.
What impact have you seen Cook play in that lock?
So this is something the Dragons have done a lot this season. They've played the 2 hooker rotation, and usually Damien Cook has obviously started all the games and Jacob Little sits on the bench. And a lot of the times Jacob Little comes on the back end of the game and he's been really, really sharp. And I'm not sure if it's because it's the less minutes that Little's getting. He's been more explosive, more dynamic. He's running a lot more. He looks a lot sharper and faster, obviously, because he's not playing the big minutes. So I think Shane Flanagan will continue to do this because I think Little is really having an impact on what the Dragons have been able to do, to bring on a fresh hooker with fresh legs and just run. And obviously, Cookie can then play that sort of roving role, almost like they played 2 hookers. Cookie, if they get a quick ruck, Cookie can run from dummy half. Little can run from dummy half. They're playing like a little man in the middle. So, look, I like it. I like what Little's doing. And I like what Shane Flanagan's done in that regard, playing the 2 hookers. Because not many teams, run the 2 hooker system. The Cowboys don't. The Sharks don't. The Storm, they kind of have a utility.
Shot, hey?
Yeah, he's like utility, can play hooker, but Harry Grant usually plays 80. The Panthers, Mitch Kenny usually plays 80. So it's just, when you've got 2 hookers like that, I think it's a good thing to do. Next game was the Good Friday game. Bulldogs 32, Rabbitohs 0. Some key takeaways from this game on the week. Another clean sheet for the Bulldogs. Have been really super impressive with their defence so far this year and what they've been able to do. Just turning up for each other, which has been really, really impressive to watch. The possession in this game was absolutely insane. Probably the biggest disparity in a game I've seen so far this year. 61% to 39 is absolutely wild. Souths had no ball. They made so much more tackles than Souths. Dogs made 307 tackles. Souths made 418 tackles. That just backs up the point. I mean, when you are making a lot of tackles, it just zaps your energy. And when you're not tackling and you've got the ball, you've got all the energy. So that's why the Bulldogs were able to, score as many points as they did. 32-0 is a fair whack. And the Dogs were really, really impressive. An interesting thing I saw this game, Cody Walker was put off at the end of the game. Lewis Dodd came on. I thought that was really interesting. I saw in the press conference Cody wasn't injured. Lewis Dodd obviously makes his NRL debut, so one to sort of keep an eye on there. Max King, what a takeaway from this game. 232 metres, 24 hit-ups, 34 tackles. Max King, is in some great form. scored a try as well, straight under the post. I think it was next to the post, which was really impressive. Max King, wow, he's come on a lot.
He's B1 for Origin as well, right?
Yeah, he's a bolter. Do they call him bolter?
No, I don't know.
An Origin bolter. I'm pretty. He's a chance of for sure.
He's a chance. Yeah, he's a dark horse.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you reckon the Dogs are doing well at the moment? I mean, there's a lot, but
I think the Dogs are obviously their defense is incredible. They're turning up for one another. They seem like a really tight knit group. The Dogs, I think. They hang out a lot together off the field from what I see across social media. They're a team that's well connected. They're a team that loves their coach, it looks like. They really want to play for their coach. I hear a lot of good things about Cameron Ciraldo and what he's been able to do. So, I think the biggest thing is their defense. That's what they're doing well at the moment. And their defense, their front-loading defense, their kick chasing in a line together, their line speed's really nice. And then off the back of that, they're getting rewards with their attack. So their defense is like at the front of their mind. They're winning games with a defensive mindset.
And it's back-to-back clean sheets, hey?
Back-to-back clean sheets, which is just incredible. So, really well done to the Dogs. The next game, Dolphins 42, Storm 22. What a game. I don't think many people would have saw this game and the result here. From the 23rd minute, this game just flipped on its head. The Storm started really well like they always do. Obviously got out to a 16-0 lead. And I'm just watching this game at home thinking, wow, this game is just going to go on where the Storm, they've got a great record at Suncorp Stadium and they are just in cruise control. They've started really well. They're going to go on. This game's going to be all over by halftime. And then from the 23rd minute, it just flipped on its head. Josh Kerr came on the field. He scored a try. And then the Dolphins just went off from there. And Isaiah Katoa, Cody Nikorima, they just took over. They were dialed in together. We've spoken a lot about the Dolphins' spine over the past couple of weeks. Their cohesion, their connection, it is still building. It is growing and growing every week. They look like a really well-connected team, playing really well. Farnworth was also really solid. For the Storm, they know Harry Grant, obviously, he's out for 4 to 6 weeks with a hamstring injury. They completed at 66%, which is not really Storm-like. Bellamy was not happy in the press conference. I don't know if you saw this, Victor, but it was actually quite funny. He got a quote here, actually. When asked if he was disappointed with the result, Bellamy responded, "Yeah, F." The legendary coach quickly regained his composure and stuck out his tongue to his own tongue slip. Quote, really disappointed actually, end quote. He said, a few laughs in the box, I think, as well. On Fox League, they were panning up to him, and Bellamy was actually he was smiling, like almost laughing at the situation, what the F are we doing? It looked like. I mean, I'd love to be in the box there one day.
With Bellamy.
Just to be a bit of a fly on the wall, and see what's he saying? Because how many times do you see in the Melbourne Storm box when he walks in or he just leaves? He's just out, or there's spit all over the glass or whatever. You know what I mean? But a very unstorm-like performance from them. They look like they were dropping off tackles as well. The Dolphins were on, and they definitely deserved that win.
Oh, that Nikorima.
Yeah, very Benji-esque. Nikorima, very underrated player, very good player, playing some really good footy at them. I found a real home at the Dolphins, I think. So, really happy for him. The next game, Warriors 20, Broncos 18. Key takeaways from this game, wow. Golden Point. Warriors get an epic win in Golden Point. That's the headline. What a wild finish this was. Broncos make a mistake off the kickoff. Reece Walsh kicks it dead in Golden Point. And then with the wind at their back, the Warriors take the shot at penalty goal. Luke Metcalf kicks the penalty goal from halfway, and it lands past the dead ball line, makes it by a mile, and then runs off with the Dame time celebration, tapping the watch. Damian Lillard actually shared the photo to his Instagram story, which is crazy. He's got millions and millions of followers. And aren't we loving the Luke Metcalf celebrations lately? What else have we got? We got this one. We got that one. The silencer. We've got the Dame time celly. Was there anything else? Last year he did the phone and then slammed it down, the hang up. I love it. Give us more of it, Lukey Met.
Do they practice this?
Do they practice it?
Do you practice your sellies in your room? Or
I don't practice my sellies in the room. I have before, like on the field at training. Yeah, like if you can, you just have a bit of fun on the training. Like if you score, like you might just do depending on the situation and the vibes at training and what we're actually doing. But yeah, boys just have a bit of fun, a bit of banter. It's all a bit of fun, a few laughs.
What do you think of the choice to take the kick when he was 1 from 4?
Yeah,
the whole night. I thought that was crazy, bro.
It's mad.
Like,
love it.
Shows the mental of this kid.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Like, dude, this game's on the line. Give me the ball. That's what he's thinking. Like, I know he didn't have the greatest night with the boot and probably could have played better in the game, but in those moments, you want your key players to step up and own them. And if you don't, like, there's an issue. So I think for him to get up there and just own the moment and, I'm 1 from 4. Let me get up here. Let me stand up. Let me win this game. So, I love the confidence. I love the fact that he just backed himself. Like, it's you take the next shot. You miss a shot, you just take the next shot. Whatever happens, is like you just get on with it. So I love that mentality. Warriors sitting in the top 4 at the moment without Fisher Harris on the weekend and without RTS, who are both out injured. 2 of their big key players, their leaders in the team, which just goes to show the Warriors and how impressive they've been able to play and just winning some tight games. Payne Haas again, 220 metres, an absolute beast. I found the Broncos, they played 2 hookers on the bench on the weekend. Tyson Smoothie and Billy Walters were on the bench, which I found was an interesting call. I know the Broncos are 5th at the moment. I'm pretty sure they've had a bye. But it will be interesting to see what Maguire does if he makes changes over the next month or so, if they don't, really start to get some wins. Obviously, big team, big club, big pressure at the Broncos, obviously after a disappointing last season. Maguire, he won't want to let that sort of stuff simmer. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Next game, Roosters 12, Panthers 40. We got done on the weekend. Some key takeaways from the game. Obviously, a disappointing result for us. Not to be able to back up such a great win against the Broncos the week before in Suncorp Stadium. We probably lacked, a bit of energy in this game. I thought, I was 18th man wearing the blue bib on the weekend. A lot of high fives for me. A lot of pats on the back. A lot of positive reinforcement.
It's a good stat line.
45 high fives, 13 pats on the back, 12 let's goes. But yeah, obviously, it was a disappointing result for us. Like I said, we couldn't get it done. We couldn't back up last week's performance, which was great. And that was disappointing. I know the boys were really disappointed after the game in the sheds. And, the Panthers were able to get their first win since round 1 in Vegas. And I thought the Panthers, I thought they played some slight adjustments on the weekend. I saw Nathan take a few more short sides than he usually does. I saw them be a little bit more aggressive on the edges with their defence, more so in the second half. The centres were jamming a little bit more, where usually they're pretty kind of passive and sort of bank on their insides to help them out with their defence. But McLean, I saw him press and jam a couple of times, which I haven't really seen from the Panthers. And they scored. They scored 2 tries off the exact same play. I thought Nathan kicked the ball really well on the weekend, which put us in sort of vulnerable positions and made us come off our own end, and we didn't have the support that we needed or required to sort of get out of our own end. And, it was disappointing. Obviously, it's always disappointing when you lose. So, but one of our best on the weekend, Fahu White. Fahu, 66 minutes. He's been outstanding for us, a real leader in our pack this year. He's come on in leaps and bounds since obviously the club has lost a lot of great leaders in the forward pack. And Connor Watson, he was also really solid as well. Teddy's always solid. And it's gonna be interesting to see if he could be Origin time.
He's
Teddy,
pushing for it.
He's doing this. To Laurie Daly.
He's saying, I'm still here.
I'm him.
Still that guy.
So I don't know what Laurie Daly does, whether he goes with Dylan Edwards or Teddy. Teddy nearly scored that try on the weekend. Dom Young kicked it back in. It kind of got a bounce, and those two were kind of at it. And, no, super competitive guys, those two. But, interesting to see which way our selectors go. You know, whether it's Teddy or whether it's Dylan Edwards. Next game, Raiders 30, Titans 20. Key takeaways from this game. I mean, Hudson Young. Geez, This man's in form. It must be the Young supplements.
The what?
Hudson Young has just brought out his very own supplement brand.
Has he?
Young Supplements.
Shout out.
They got a website? Let's shout him out. Hudson Young is in the form of his life at the moment. 2 tries in each of his last 3 games. He's been one of the most dominant forwards in the competition and is really pressing his claims for a starting position in Laurie Daly's Origin team. He's obviously come off the bench the last couple of years. You know, both of these teams have pretty similar stat lines. Anything on Young Supplements before we move on?
It is Young Supplements.
Youngsupplements.com.au, is it?
.com.au. Just .com.
.com. What do they got? Protein?
Whey
protein.
Mass
creatine. Beautiful.
The trifecta.
Awesome.
Big trifecta. So
let's give him a shout out. Youngsupplements.com. Hudson Young is on the supplement regime.
He must have just started that 3 games ago.
He must have started at 3 games. Nah, jokes aside, like he's killing it at the moment. He's been in some awesome form. And that Raiders forward pack have been in great form as well. And that's why they've been able to play the football they have so far this season, is because of their forward pack. And, you know, Jamal Fogarty has also been playing really well. He had 2 try assists on the weekend, 1 run for 8 metres, but finding ways to affect the game with his kicking. And Jamal Fogarty has always been a really great kicker of the ball. And will be really interesting. I know I said it on previous podcasts to see where Jamal Fogarty ends up next season. Obviously off contract this year. You know, from all reports, I'm pretty sure the Raiders offered 1 year and then they changed it to 2 years. Obviously there's been talk about will he go to Manly, obviously because Cherry Evans is moving on, and having, you know, young Ethan Sanders there on their roster who, you know, has massive raps on him as a future superstar halfback coming in, whether that's next year or the year after, you know, and what that means for Fogarty. It's obviously, you know, these conversations are very, what's the word? Very touchy conversations, like very delicate, you know, how you go about it. Obviously, you know, you want to be respectful, but also you need to be truthful and honest about the situation and who, you know, you see as the starting halfback for next year. You know, is it the veteran or is it the young guy? Like, just, you know, I know as a veteran, like, you just want to know where you stand. Just tell me the honest truth of what you're seeing. Don't bullshit me. And, the Raiders are in really, really great form on the back of their forward pack. Hudson Young, Papali'i has been dominant as well. And that's the Raiders. Ricky Stewart's Raiders are just flying under the radar at the moment.
They're third.
They're
third, which is unreal.
Wow.
So good. Did you see tit on RCG?
I did.
Off the drop kick.
That's one for the little guys.
One for the little guys. RCG with the tissues coming out.
With the tissues coming out of the nose from a bleeding nose, just winds up off the kickoff. He winds up, Reggie, Big Reg. He winds up off the back fence, comes in, turns the hip slightly. Starling just gives him everything he's got, drops the ball, clapping in his face, just getting all around it. Yeah, the little guys. Yeah, I mean, it's fun.
That's rugby league.
That's rugby league. That's why we love it. The next game, Sharks 34, Knights 14. Well, some really, really key takeaways from this game. Some interesting one for the Knights. I mean, Greg Alexander from Fox League labelled the Knights' attack as, quote, horrible, end quote, in Fox League commentary, saying, quote, I just can't believe how poorly they are playing, end quote. I mean, obviously they've changed their spine a few times over the past couple of weeks, which kind of hasn't really fixed their problem. You know, I've watched the Knights and I'm not really sure as to what their problem is. They run everyone runs the same plays in the competition pretty much. But there is times where, like, all you need is like a soft try from nothing, and they're not really getting those tries at the moment. So a soft try from nothing is like a dummy half passes to a forward who just, you know, dives over and scores, or they put a crossfield kick and someone bats it back and it bounces, then it lands in your hands and you score. Like, you know, these tries, they're all tries. You know what I mean? They all play a part in, you know, what happens. And the Knights are just getting nothing at the moment. I'm pretty sure they've scored 8 points in their last 4 or 5 weeks. They're in a bit of a rut. They're, you know, probably low on confidence at the moment with how they're playing. And you can tell it's kind of affecting them pretty bad. Obviously, the coaches made a couple of changes over the past couple of weeks with their players. And I sense, obviously, a lot of frustration with the Knights, not being able to get it done. And for the Sharks, well, they were really impressive. Obviously, another win for the Sharks. Blake Brayley, I thought had a really solid game. Will Kennedy's in great form at the moment. Blake Brayley probably, goes a little bit underrated in this side. Plays 80 minutes every week. Always makes a stack of tackles, really crafty, got a solid kicking game. Never looks tired, Blake Brayley. Never looks tired. I mean, I've trained and played with Blake Brayley, and I've seen him run the 1.2, and he's just like, he's just not even tired. Light work, baby. Yeah. Sharks were on Stone Street, scored a couple of tries. He's been really impressive too, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Stone Street.
Oh, of course. I think with the Knights, it's like...
of course.
Sorry, yeah, of course.
I love that.
It's all good. I think with the Knights, it's just they're not completing. Like last week, they completed
last week
67.
they were horrendous last week.
Like so bad.
Yeah.
And then this week, 65%. And it's like, you're just not going to win footy games.
Yeah. And that's, if you drop the ball and you tackle, you lose. If you make more tackles than the opposition, a lot of the time you lose. Like if you don't control the ball, don't respect the ball, you lose. And that's as simple as rugby league can get sometimes. So
they got the attack.
They've got it. I mean, they need to get Kalen Ponga in situations where he can do his best work.
Yeah.
And I have an idea about how I would do it, but we'll leave that for another time. All right.
No,
no, like plays that I would play. I would play more off like the post. I'd play off the post, and I would sit 4 here on the short side, and I would either let Ponga take on a really wide 4, or I'd sit him out here, and then I'd play flat shape with him on an edge. I know I'm talking a bit technical, but back rower, centre, winger on the sideline, let him play short, long, or over the top. I can get into more detail at another time, probably in another situation, but there are a few things that Pong has done really well over the past couple of years when we've had to preview him on how to stop him. And it's like when you get him in this situation, he's like, man, he's hard to defend. So either really wide 4 from the post, which a lot of the time teams will put a fullback on him as well, and otherwise flat shape on the edge. Some people may not know what I'm talking about, but like I said, I will get into it another time in the podcast. Let's move on to the next game, which is the last game on Easter Monday. Parramatta 38, Tigers 22. Some key takeaways from that game. Well, Mitch Moses masterclass. Welcome back into the Eels fold. And they look like a completely different team with Mitch Moses back. 3 try assists. Only made 8 tackles. Excuse me. That's a dream. And a couple of podcasts ago when we played the Warriors, I made 42 tackles, and he made 8. Like that's dress 4 per half. Imagine how fresh you'd be. That's awesome. I love that. The Parramatta Eels 36 of 41, 86% completion, which is the highest Parramatta have had all year. They actually controlled the ball. They respected the ball. Moses executed the kicking game. And for the Tigers, well, they missed 35 tackles. They were in it for a long time, obviously, but played, obviously, without Galvin this week, who played New South Wales Cup. There was a fair bit of sort of, media around his game in New South Wales Cup. But, like we spoke about earlier on the podcast, it will be interesting to see if Lachlan Galvin is back in the team or he's out of the club.
We'll see.
I mean, who knows? But, yeah, Parramatta are really impressive and have got a really good win rate. I think it's 62% win rate at CommBank Stadium. So, a really good game from Parramatta.
Going back to the 8 tackles, do you think that's on the Tigers for not targeting Mitch more?
100%, definitely. The opposite back rower, whoever, I'm trying to remember who was, would it be Seyfarth or Fainu? It'd be Fainu. It's his job.
Because Mitch depends on the right, hey?
It'd be Fainu. His job needs to run it at Moses more. Yep. That's on him.
He only ran 9 times for 65 metres.
9 times for 65 metres. I mean, I don't know whether they dropped him back into the ruck a little bit more than usual. I think that, I'm sure they'll review that after the game for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go. Big Footy Guy of the Week, where you guys can get amongst this. Head over to @Chad Townsend Show Instagram and vote in the comments section who you think is the Big Footy Guy of the Week, and you'll go in the draw for a $50 playersgolfclub.com.au voucher. Now, nominations this week. Max King, 1 try, 3 tackle breaks, 232 metres, 34 tackles, 0 misses. Max King doing it for the Dogs in the front row. Our second nomination is Ray Stone. Ray Stone. Love this bloke. Just an absolute baller. Got great tackle technique. 2 tries, 3 tackle breaks, 124 metres, 25 tackles, 0 misses off the bench for the Dolphins. Ray Stone's one of those guys where he's like a junkyard dog where he just fights for scraps and just goes, just gets everything. He's just an absolute dog. Love Ray Stone. What a player. And obviously Mitch Moses as well. You know, Mitch, it's Mitch season, 3 try assists, 2 line break assists and 8 tackles. I mean, I love that. That's a stat worth noting. 8 tackles for a halfback. I love that. Halfback House. This week our nominations are for Halfback House, where we look at 2 halves. We just look at some of their stats and some of their players. Katoa. And we've got Katoa and Nikorima, which we touched on a little bit briefly before. But Katoa, 3 try assists. And the first try assist we want to break down, actually, where the Dolphins got to kind of just outside the right post, and they had their 3 middle forwards. One was in, that block shape. One was out the back. And then one was leading for Katoa. Really, really well executed play. The middle forwards get the ball, tip onto Katoa, who gets out the back. And then he's got, Connolly Lemuelu running a flat lead line, hammer out the back. And he double pumps it, looks to play short, and then plays short. And it was just such a well-executed play from Katoa. Really held the ball up. I know some people thought it may have been flat or forward, but I thought it was really well executed. And you see the smile on his face after just the execution. To have your 3 forwards for the Dolphins, execute and be in position, all well-timed runs, good passing, and then Katoa gets to do what Katoa does. I thought that was a really, really nice piece of play from the Dolphins on the weekend. Nikorima, obviously that the Benji-esque flick pass, which you were a big fan of, Victor.
That was nice.
That was nice.
I let out an audible whoa.
Whoa. Yeah.
I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, that flick pass, it kind of flicked to Ray Stone in the perfect, like the Storm were all sort of chasing him. He sees it just out of nowhere in the back corner of his eye, sees him, and then just pops it up in perfect position. And then Ray Stone just catches it and gets a try. Yeah, what a well done from Nikorima. That was hectic. And obviously Scott Sorensen, he's flick passed as well on the weekend. I know we don't really like talking too much about the opposition, against the Roosters, but we will give Sorrow some flowers. That flick pass was really, really nice from Sorrow. Mitch Moses, 3 try assists, led the Eels to a massive win. He's our nomination, another halfback of the week, in Halfback House. And that try he set up at the back end of the game, where it's like, the game's in the balance. It's still really close. There's 5 minutes to go on the clock. And Parramatta just make a sort of half break to halfway. Moses gets the ball off a 2 pass from Dylan Brown, and then sees that the Tigers' line is nice and tight. There's no one at home, obviously, because the fullback has just made Bull has just made the tackle, and then he sees Simonson up nice and flat, and this is a really nice piece of play from Simonson, just to be flat and calling for the ball, and Moses just puts it on a string, puts it to the corner on zero or first tackle, kicks it pinpoint to the corner, gets the perfect bounce. Simonson just dives on the ball, scores, and that's game over. A really well executed piece of play from Mitch Moses there.
Yep. Moving on to some fan questions.
Fan questions, let's go. Finish off with fan questions for today.
It's from the Insta.
Here we go, yep.
Who would you say is the toughest player to play against?
Toughest player to play against now in the competition? Geez. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think, it's always tough playing against Viliami Kikau. Like, he's really quite hard to handle because he's so big and powerful. I think, who else is there? I mean, David Fafita's hard to handle on the edge. But,
who's an underrated one?
Underrated one?
Like Kikau, Fafita, they're big names, but
yeah.
It's the one that they don't normally talk about.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, actually. Kind of put on the spot here, but...
Sorry, mate.
Yeah.
You want to come back to it?
Yeah, I'll come back to it.
Come back to it. All right, next one.
Yeah.
Do you have a good mindset with money early, or did it come later in the career?
I always had a good mindset with money very early on in my career. I had a financial planner at 18 years old before I'd even pretty much had an NRL contract. I worked and saved, got in the habit of saving money really early before I'd signed my NRL deal. And then once I signed my NRL deal, I just became kind of obsessed with it. And then I actually studied financial planning just to learn a bit more about the situation and tax and superannuation and capital gains and property and shares. And then I used all that knowledge as well as my financial planner to implement a plan and build a team of people that I trust and plan for the future.
It's the way to do it.
It is the way to do it. I would offer that advice to any player in the competition, almost anyone out there. You know, build a team of people around you can trust and plan for the future. It doesn't matter when you need to start. You need to start. Just start. That's the hardest thing. Just start doing it. Good question, by the way.
Yeah, great question. How many days a week do you do strength training?
In season, it sort of varies. Predominantly, I'd say 2 to 3. In season, because we've obviously got games, we're kind of preparing for the game, so it kind of changes. Pre-season 4 times a week, but in season kind of 2 to 3, depending on the turnaround from when the games are. And they will range from strength, power, and upper body and lower body. Yep.
Nice. What's your favorite thing about commentating?
My favorite thing about commentating is just watching the game and just breaking down the play. And I feel like as a rugby league player in our game, like you can be critiqued on every single play. Like how you've tackled, how long you play the ball, your pass, like absolutely everything. And the way I watch the game is very, and most NRL players are the same. They watch it with very detailed eyes on like what I've been coached and what I've been taught. I watch the game about how, what I believe the player or players should be doing. So I love breaking down plays, and I love when teams, like, you can see they've worked for something during the week, like a set piece or whatever, and they execute. Like, I love that. I love breaking down. Because I love when if you work on something and then you execute it in a game, and it's just the best feeling. So I love that aspect of commentating and just, having, I guess, just using my brain to sort of, my experience in the game to sort of pick apart, what I see.
Yeah, 100%. That's it.
Beauty. All right, that's it for today's podcast, guys. Look, we really appreciate you tuning in to the show. Please make sure you do rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. And if you're watching here on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe. Drop us a comment here and like the video. It's a small thing to do, and it does help our podcast push and grow and help us, do this stuff. So we really do appreciate it, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.